All right, we're back here on the Chase Holmes podcast, joined now by old friend Grayson Weir. Grayson, good afternoon, sir. College football in the SEC is on fire, per usual, and it's nice for Tennessee not to be the least bit involved in just a coaching search gone awry. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. You're right. It's the craziest time of year in football. We got all kinds of chaos going on down on the plains, but yeah, pretty quiet in Knoxville, and after a chaotic couple weeks, pretty quiet in Oxford as well. So I can't complain over here.
No, and we'll get into why it's not all that crazy right now in Oxford momentarily. I mean, there's a lot of crossover now between Auburn and Ole Miss fans, and there always really was. I mean, you go back to the Tuberville stuff years and years ago, and just like, oh, what is the ceiling? And there's been a lot of debate of like which is the better job at this point, Ole Miss and Auburn. And then obviously Hugh Freeze having a lot of recruiting success, beating Saban a couple times at Ole Miss. He's going back home to Auburn and getting back to the SEC, but he's a local Mississippi guy. For the Auburn fans who are tuning in today, Grayson, what can you fill them in on during the experience you had as an Ole Miss guy during the Hugh Freeze era? What can you tell them? Shed some light on.
I'm going to go two ways with here. I'm going to start as a coach.
Mm.
Hugh Freeze is a very good ball coach. He wins football games. He knows how to take not necessarily upper tier talent, but that kind of middle of the level guys who are really just absolute dogs and want to go out there and toppled Saban and Alabama on back-to-back years. So he wins ball games, and he is a certified winner. He knows how to recruit, and now in the NIL era, you can actually pay players legally. So we know he's really good at paying players. So that's certainly something to hang your hat on. I question how different, if Auburn fired Gus Malzahn, whatever that was, 3 years ago, 3 years ago, I guess now. How different is Hugh Freeze's offense from Gus Malzahn's? I don't think they're all too dissimilar. So if it didn't work then, why does it work now? I think the difference is that Hugh Freeze is a better coach. I think Hugh Freeze has proved he can win everywhere he goes. But with that being said, he's a creep. He's just a creep. He's a weird guy. He always has been. The man loves to search his name on Twitter. If you haven't seen it yet, God Forbid on Hulu is a documentary about Liberty University and Jerry Falwell and the pool boy and all that stuff. It makes a lot of sense that he was there because he's just like the rest of them. He's kind of someone who likes to hear his name in the media. He likes to hear, people talking about him. He likes when he has this not scandal. Well, not anymore, but when he did at Ole Miss, he had this scandalous personal life and kept it to himself and was, this holy preacher man in the media. And then he was turned around being a weird guy on the outside of things. So my question is how long he can last at Auburn before things, maybe rubs people the wrong way. But everybody deserves a second chance in life. For the most part, there's obviously some caveats to that, but for the most part, everybody deserves a second chance in life. And he has had that second chance. Now has he really changed? We'll find out. But it's a good hire for Auburn. I don't think it's a bad decision. I just don't necessarily think it was a good one from a personal life standpoint.
It's never great when you have pushback from a lot of folks in the building, and I think there's going to be continued pushback based on the early returns here, and rightfully so. And we'll see if winning cures all. I don't know. I have no idea. I think anyone who has a good read on how this is going to go with Freeze at Auburn is a liar. Like that, we have no idea which way this is going to go, and
it could prove very successful.
Right. But it can also be very successful for like 2 years, right? Like we saw with that Orgeron, you can win a title and then be gone very, very quickly. Like he could win big on the Plains and then people go really tired of his shtick and everything else. And he still hasn't evolved. He's still name searching. It's like, you just won the national title in 2025. And it's like, what are we doing? But that's a possibility. Like we can see like teams will move on and universities have more money than ever to move on. And then we'll get the next out of the box hire at Auburn, because it just seems like the pendulum either goes, all right, we got to get our SEC guy. We tried going outside the box with the Brian Harsons of the world. We're going back into the SEC family. And then it's like, if this doesn't work out, it's like, all right, we got to get someone who's not in the Auburn family who can get us back on track, who will make this a respectable organization again. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think Auburn is a weird job. I think it's still a very weird situation. I thought it was going to get way weirder than this,
I did too.
where if this did not go this way for Auburn and Hugh Freeze did not end up taking the job, or they did not find a way to make it all work, I think it could have gotten very bleak on the timeline very quickly, because I saw names like James Franklin. It's like, God, James Franklin's not leaving Penn State for that job. And we just saw, like, there's a reason it was Harsin last time. There's some weird stuff going on with the Auburn job. And I wonder if a lot of folks like your guy Kiffin are like, am I sure I really, really want to get into that? It takes a special kind of coach to be able to deal with the complexity of the Auburn job on and off the field. And
Complexity is a
I,
good word.
yeah, and it's just, I don't know. I think this could have gotten really weird really quickly, and well, just TBD on the Hugh Freeze stuff. Anyone who's writing great hire or anyone's writing terrible hire, I mean, this is going to be a mercurial. Who knows? Like, you could tell me anything with this hire, and I would believe you at this point.
Absolutely. I just think the funniest part to me is, they tried Auburn fans and boosters and everybody at Auburn behind the scenes tried to oust Brian Harsin with a false story about, him with his staffer, which was not true, but was not proven, right? We know all that to be. And then now you're hiring the guy who was using the university issued cell phone to call an escort number in Tampa Bay. It's like, well, wait a minute. Isn't this kind of exactly what you tried to fire the last guy for? So I don't know. But like you said, I mean, jury's completely out here. It could be the best hire Auburn has ever made because the man wins football games. It could be the worst hire Auburn has ever made because he's Hugh Freeze. We don't know.
We'll see. But we do know that Lane Kiffin is staying at Ole Miss. Grayson, are you surprised that Lane Kiffin is locked in long term now?
No, I was
Okay.
not like even the slightest bit surprised by him staying in Oxford. I, since the get go, had no reason to believe that he would leave. I know he was considering it, right? But
Mm,
that would be silly not to. If I had a school, or not a school, if I had a job that was offering me potentially $4 million more a year than what I was making right now, of course I'm going to consider it. Like, of course I'm going to think, how would my life be if I took this, $4 million pay bump to go to a new job? Of course I'm going to consider it. We don't know 100% whether Lane interviewed for the job or not. It's my understanding that he likely interviewed once, if not twice, for the job. So there was consideration there. But at the end of the day, when you look at everything he's built in Oxford, on top of like the family and his daughter's a senior at Oxford High School right now. She
mm,
just moved from LA to Oxford, Mississippi to go to her senior year of high school at a new school. From what I understand, she's like planning to, if not already enrolled at Ole Miss, has the
mm,
dorm room picked out. Like, why would he then uproot all of that to then go to Auburn, where, like you said, there is a lot of complexity with that job? And at Ole Miss, there is a lot of flexibility with the job. Whereas at Auburn, you got to play in Bo Jackson's golf tournament every March. In Oxford, at Ole Miss, he's in Boca Raton marlin fishing. Auburn wouldn't give him that same leash. They wouldn't give him that same. I mean, I don't know that to be true, but we do kind of know that to be true. They wouldn't give him that same leash. He wouldn't have that same leash. He wouldn't have that same flexibility. So it never made sense to me from the beginning, other than one, a negotiating standpoint. Jimmy Sexton is the best in the business. That dude is so good at his job. I mean, the amount of people he gets paid is unbelievable. Lane being the most recent. And two, money. I mean, it came down to money in the end. And Ole Miss in Mississippi, you're not able to offer state employees, public employees, a contract that's longer than 4 years.
mm.
So at Auburn, you can get 10 years, 9 million a year. At Ole Miss, you can get 9 million a year, 4 years. But Ole Miss found a way, and I don't know how this loophole hasn't been discovered before. I feel like somebody should have
I
come
was
up.
going to ask you about this. I don't understand the Ole Miss Foundation aspect of this, the private foundation
I don't
part.
really understand it either. And I've looked
Mm,
into it. I've been talking to people. I've been trying to kind of get how this worked. But credit to Keith Carter and Jimmy
mm,
Sexton. it's all under wraps. So all the finances and where it's coming from doesn't really add up, but we do know they found this loophole that it seems to me it should have been found years ago, where they're paying the public employee through a private foundation. So
Mm.
they can offer him the lengthier contract, which they did. It's 6 years, up to 8 years with rollovers and things of that nature.
It's
Why
like
would
his own NIL deal to stay at Ole Miss.
Right. Yeah. And then why would you yeah, exactly. Why would you then take, equivalent or in the general ballpark for the same number to then move jobs? It never made any sense from the beginning. I stood by it from the beginning and I, was really frustrated with a lot of the reports. And I know Lane was too. I think this last week where we saw all the hecticness with, oh my God, it's done, Lane's leaving. I don't think any of that was ever true.
Mm.
But there was a certain reporter, and I'm not going to name the name, but everybody knows which reporter it was, who said it was a done deal. That was never true. That was never close to being true. And all of the smoke and mirrors behind it all stemmed from that. And Lane would not have handled it the way that he did if it weren't for that report. He told his team internally, I'm not planning on leaving. He told his team, I'm focused on Thursday beating Mississippi State. I'll sign the contract Friday. I've signed 3 extensions already. What does a fourth do? Like, what difference does it make? What difference is it if I sign it Tuesday and Friday? Now, I understand it would have given some closure to the situation if you just signed it on Tuesday, but that's not how this works. It's not how it has ever worked. It's not how it will work next year when, Lane is leaving for the Montana State job. It's just going to be continued cycle. And so all of this goes to say that Lane was frustrated with how it was handled. I know Lane's people, being Jimmy Sexton and his camp, were frustrated with how it was handled. And in turn, so were Ole Miss fans. But Ole Miss fans now have no reason to be frustrated anymore.
What happened down the stretch for Ole Miss? Do you think what was going on behind the scenes played into just their final 2-week struggle? I mean, we saw that at Liberty with the way they ended their season too, and planning for the Hugh Freeze exit. I wonder, like, did you see a change? Like, what happened? Because part of it, I wonder, it's easy to just be like, oh, Kiffin, and you heard that falling out of the Egg Bowl. It's like, oh, Kiffin had a lot of other stuff on his plate, and his mind was elsewhere, this, that, and the other. But it's like, if you look at the Ole Miss schedule, it was very strange the way it was put together because it was just a lot of appetizers for several weeks outside of the Kentucky home game that, like, we're not going to see them really get tested until, I mean, late October. And you saw the way they play. They were just a throwaway from beating Alabama potentially. Jaxson Dart had the ball in his hands. Your guy Jackson, who we'll talk about in a second. But I mean, I look at that schedule and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, they probably should have beaten Mississippi State, but like finished around 9-3, 10-2. But their schedule is just so backloaded with SEC West team after SEC West team that, like, I don't care what kind of team you are. That's just a brutal way to finish your season when you're the least healthy. Like, you're banged up at that point. And I don't know. I don't know what to make of this skid for the Rebels. Did you see that coming when you saw the schedule? How much did that play in it? And were you surprised by how it finished for this group?
I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed
Mm.
because I do think that the Lane to Auburn smoke, the locker room they looked against Arkansas in particular. They
Mm.
looked like a team where a bunch of 18 to 21-year-old kids had been reading on Twitter all week that their coach was leaving.
Mm.
So I think that definitely played a role in it. But to your point, no, like, I wasn't surprised by it because Ole Miss should have started the season 6-0. Period. The end. 7-0
Mm.
made a lot of sense. That's exactly what happened. And then you run into Alabama. Arkansas is a very good team. KJ Jefferson's a good quarterback. He just, bruised his way through that game. And credit to Arkansas where credit is due. They played a heck of a game. But when you look at that box score, Ole Miss turned the ball over 3 times. They had 10 penalties for 108 yards or something like that. And they outgained Arkansas in yardage, in first downs, in basically all of the offensive categories where you want to beat your opponent.
Mm.
They did. But then there were a couple calls, I won't get into the officiating because officiating always has something to do with every single game. So there's no excuses to be made, oh, this call goes the other way. You could say that about every game.
Just don't
But
put yourself in a position to have a officiating call be what decides whether or not your team wins or not.
exactly. And there were some bad calls that could have
Mhm,
gone the other way that changed the game. Same with the Alabama game. I think there's a couple calls it goes the other way. Ole Miss has a really good opportunity, even better opportunity to win than it did. Um, no, it didn't surprise me. I said before the season, 8-3 made a lot of sense. Somewhere in there,
mhm,
um, or 8-4 rather, 9-3. Somewhere in there made a lot of sense, and that's exactly what happened. Arkansas is a great team. Mississippi State should have won that game. You absolutely have every opportunity to do so. Credit to, I can't think of his name right now, but number 5 on Mississippi State made that great play on the 2-point conversion. They were
mhm,
ready for it. My issue there was I didn't have a problem with the play call. I thought it was a good play call. I thought it made sense. It had worked a couple times throughout the season. It had worked in other teams, but the Chiefs have been running that play for 3-4 years now. It's not a
mhm.
secret anymore. Players are ready for that. They know to look for these things. They know these little gadget plays here and there are coming, and they just made a great play when it was right. So no, I wasn't surprised by it. This was always supposed to be. I use the term rebuilding year loosely. Uh,
Mhm,
this was a different team than it was last year. Matt Corral's gone. You're losing basically your entire backfield, the entire your star wide receivers off to the NFL. It was a completely different offense, and the defense, for the most part, was the secondary was the same, but there was a lot of turnover on defense too. This year was supposed to be the year. Okay, they're good, not great. Next year, Jaxson Dart's, a year and a half. He entering the year, he had played 6 games at USC.
mhm.
Everyone was like, "Oh, he's this amazing talent." He is. He's young. There's a lot. This was never supposed to be the year, but there was a chance for it to be the year anyway, and it should have been if a couple things go differently here and there. If that makes sense.
No, it does, and it's really, really hard to win 10 games back-to-back seasons. Like, this is something next year for Tennessee fans you have to, wait for. Hendon Hooker's gone, Cedric Tillman will be gone. A lot of leaders, will be off this team next year. We'll see what happens with Joe Milton and company, but it's hard. It's hard to win 10 games in the SEC in back-to-back seasons. Only a couple of teams can do it and expect it year over year, but 8-4, 9-3, that's still a good year to follow up what you lost, and I don't know. It's just hard to get a read on where the SEC West is going because, I mean, Auburn, we'll see, but still, because there's another part of this where the portal and Lane Kiffin being the portal king and what he's going to do in the coming days, and we saw that's major reason why these jobs are all filling up very quickly. It's like these universities don't have a choice. Like you have to hire someone by December 5th, and really days before, so you can get your transfer staff in order and really get people in place to watch a bunch of tape and figure out who you need to target in the portal and who you can get and who you can't and that sort of thing. It's just a lot happens very, very quickly
He's
in
already
December.
recruiting at Auburn,
Yeah,
and it's been 2 hours.
exactly. Like it's
Yeah.
just you have to do it. And those conversations were probably happening beforehand of like, all right, I need you to start. I think this is gonna happen, but I need you to jump on it. I don't know what your Monday is, but clear your schedule. I don't know. I'm very curious to see what the ceiling is because I think that's the biggest talking point with regards to what Lane Kiffin's gonna do at Ole Miss, right? Is what can they be? And it's something that I do push back against South Carolina fans over the last few weeks because look, they kicked the crap out of Tennessee 2 weeks ago, but it's like a program changing win over Clemson and beating Clemson and Tennessee back weeks. Like 2 top 10 wins, it's really good. Now, if South Carolina and Shane Beamer, like if he only entered the chat in November every single year and you had someone else coach the team before that, then yeah, maybe there's some real opportunity. But you won the SEC East once since you joined the SEC. You've never won the SEC. Like, just win 10 games once. Let's just see that. The full season counts, and in this sport, we all have amnesia over the course of the full year. It's like wait, when you beat Alabama, let's just wait on that one, or even our competitive against Georgia. All that to say, I am very curious with Jaxson Dart going into year 2 in this system, with what they were able to do in the run game this year. I wonder what their ceiling is because Alabama, they lose Bryce Young next year. Jahmyr Gibbs probably gone as well. They're going to be in turnover. We don't know what their coordinator situation is going to be. Bill O'Brien might get another job. We'll see what that group looks like. But I mean, Bama looked beatable. This was a more susceptible Bama team. LSU, we'll see. I don't know if Jaden Daniels will be the quarterback again, but I think the West is more mercurial than it has ever been, where you can make the case for a lot of different teams. So when folks are like, "Oh, can you really win a title or win the SEC at Ole Miss?" I think this is the most open it's ever been, and I think Lane Kiffin's looking around. He's like, "I just won 10 games here last year. I can get the quarterbacks I want. I can get a 5-star kid, which is a big part of this. I can do it. I can. My offense works here. I'm recruiting. I can do well in the portal. I know there's a path for this Ole Miss thing to be sustainable, and I think he's taking it. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a path this year to the playoff.
Mhm.
That Alabama game goes differently. You're
Right.
riding that high. Hopefully Arkansas goes differently. You're looking at a one, maybe two loss Ole Miss team. And
Mhm.
that playoff isn't that far out of reach. The SEC West, I mean, you beat LSU. Credit to LSU. They won that game handily. I mean, that
Mhm.
was the best game Brian Kelly has coached in his 12 games at LSU.
Mhm.
Um, th- there was a path to the playoff this year. There was a path
Mhm.
to the SEC West this year. There was a path to the SEC championship. They squandered it, and that's okay because it doesn't need to be. Ole Miss fans. There's a lot of Ole Miss fans out there that, oh, we didn't win 10 games. That's okay. Why,
Mhm.
why is that a big like? Oh, we're not going to a New Year's Six bowl. That's okay. It's not going to happen. I mean, remember where we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago with I say we because I'm an alumni, but
Mhm.
um, like remember where Ole Miss was 4 years ago before Lane Kiffin when Matt Luke was there? It's like Ole Miss fans were just happy to make a bowl game. And then
Mhm.
now it's the expectation is that we need to be in the playoff every year. We need to be this. We need to be that. Ole Miss needs to be this. We are this amazing fan base full of amazing boost. Not really. Ole Miss is a good fan base. We work hard. We support our team, but it's no different than a Texas A&M. It's no, Texas A&M's Kyle Field. They've got 100 and whatever it is, thousand people there every game. Ole Miss doesn't. It's just
Mhm.
not the same playing field, and that's okay because you have a guy in Lane Kiffin who can level that playing field. He is the difference to where Matt Luke can't. There's no title. There's no path to a SEC West title with Matt Luke.
Mhm.
Even with Hugh Freeze, there wasn't ever really a path there because he
Mhm.
had to go through Alabama. And even though he went through Alabama, there were a couple of chances where they would turn around and squander that with a loss to Memphis or, Arkansas on 4th and 25, stupid things like that. The SEC West parity, we talk a lot about parity in college football. Of all of the years for the SEC West, there is this level of parity. Texas A&M was supposed to be this top 6 team in the country. They were awful.
Yep.
So, now next year,
But
they
yet they
could.
still beat LSU by multiple touchdowns. Like the SEC West just had those results week after week where you're like, I'm not sure who's the best team in the SEC West. And I still have, you could sell me on a lot of different teams on any given Saturday that they were actually the best team all season long in the SEC West.
100%. You could sell me on Mississippi State. That
Right.
game on Thursday, they played a heck of a game. They
Mm-hmm.
really did. In a cold, rainy, wet environment on the road, Mike Leach went in there and, did what he had to do. Credit to him. So I think Lane looked around and saw that of now or never.
Right.
Why would you go start over at Auburn when you have something, you have momentum, you're rolling, you're rocking, you're winning 8 games a year.
You can make the
And
playoff at Ole Miss.
yeah, you can. I mean, it's crazy to think because Ole Miss shouldn't be able to make the playoff.
Right.
When you look at how they fit into the SEC and where they have been in the past, they shouldn't have a chance at the playoff. Lane Kiffin is the difference maker, and he knows that. He doesn't care what people are doing. He doesn't, it pisses him off that there's idiots fans out there driving to his house and putting up a for sale sign. It's like, what are you doing?
Is that happening?
There was one who did that, and I know exactly who he is, and I won't name his name,
Was that
but
this season?
3 4 days ago,
Oh my goodness.
drove to his house and put a for sale sign in his front yard. Why? What are you doing? Everyone on Twitter, oh, fine, good. Lane's gone anyway. He coached a terrible game on Thursday. What? What are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
why are you unable to see that at Ole Miss, we are
He's the
not
best coach you've had in our lifetime.
ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, ever. When you look at the, like, maybe I'm sure you can make the case for Billy Brewer, but can you? Johnny Vaught, sure, fine, whatever. Can you? They didn't really do anything. Ole Miss hasn't won a national championship since before national championships were really counted. So people need to level their expectations, and Lane Kiffin is the guy who can make that path walkable.
Yeah. But hey, baseball school too. I mean, you just won the title in
Of
baseball,
course.
so things are pretty good. I know the state of Mississippi. They are adamant about their baseball, and look, I mean, the Tennessee train coming down the pike, and they had fun in Oxford this past spring. So we'll see what ultimately happens in baseball season. But basketball, it's probably the rough one. Or maybe that's where the angst is coming from for Ole Miss fans, where they're like, oh my god. It's time to turn our attention to the worst basketball program in the SEC this year. What are we doing? Where are we going? We got to change gears a little bit. Where is Andy Kennedy? Is Andy Kennedy?
Yeah,
Can we get
no
it back?
kidding, man.
Yeah.
Kermit's not the guy. He is not.
No.
He is not him.
No.
Good team, good recruiter, good players. It's going to be the same thing in Oxford. It's been the last 5 or 6 years. They'll be right on the bubble. They'll either get in, they'll lose the first round game. They won't get into the March Madness. They'll be a number 1 seed
Do
in
you
the
think they're a
NIT.
bubble team? I don't think they sniff the bubble.
It's the same thing every year. They'll beat Auburn on the road, then
Mm,
they'll turn around and lose to Morehead State at home. It's
mm.
just this
Marshall
constant.
Henderson's not walking through that door.
No,
What's real and what's not real when it comes to Jaxson Dart? As someone who watched every snap from Jaxson Dart this fall, what
and
did you
also
see? What did you hear nationally where you're like, okay, they clearly have not watched a lot of Jaxson Dart? Like, what was real and what wasn't? Because for me, all year, I didn't trust him, where it was like so much of Quinshon Jenkins and the success they've had in the run game was partly because you like, he did some stuff, but it never felt like Jaxson Dart was ready. It was still a growing pains, like we're not taking the training wheels type of year for him. That is what I got the sense of watching him week in, week out. But what did you see and what did people miss nationally when they did not watch Jaxson Dart throughout the course of the full season?
I think what you just said is spot on. I mean, it was a growing pain year, and we always knew it was going to be a growing pain year.
Mm,
Jaxson Dart came to Ole Miss February or March or whatever it was, January. Um, he had not played more than 6 games at USC. So
mm,
he came in, he was not this sophomore. He wasn't a redshirt freshman coming in with experience under his belt. He was a fresh out of high school, had got thrown into a bad USC team in a bad situation without a head coach in a conference that's very different from the SEC. So Jaxson has always been raw. He's a raw quarterback, a raw talent, and he's young. I mean, he's
mm,
only, I think he just turned 19 recently. It's not like he's this 21-year-old kid, Dylan Gabriel, transferring from UCF to Oklahoma, where it's okay, you're this plug and play guy right away. You are now the future. Let's do this thing. You're back with your old offensive coordinator. Dart's coming in, learning a new system. The quarterback battle lasted all the way, until the first week of the year when there probably was a reason for that. Jaxson wasn't entirely ready. And that's
mm,
okay. And that's like you said, they gave the ball to Judkins a lot, perhaps even too much in some instances. His legs down the stretch against Alabama were not there because Ole Miss gave him the ball too much in that game. That was always going to be the case. It wasn't supposed to be Judkins, it was supposed to be Zach Evans. But what happened. Judkins is him. So the biggest thing that national people who didn't watch Jaxson Dart, and now I've been watching Jaxson Dart. So both my parents went to USC, so I
mm,
USC and Ole Miss guy. Uh,
mm,
I grew up, the 2005, 2004 Ole Miss USC team was what got me into sports and what got me into college football. So I knew about Jaxson since his senior year of high school at Corner Canyon out there in Utah, and he just slings the ball.
mm,
But he wasn't playing against great competition. He didn't really have much of a pass rush, and he just would sling it around. Some of the
mm,
throws were very ill advised. That was the case again this year, and that's all right. Lane knows what to do with quarterbacks. Matt Corral had a couple years under him, so it was a quicker learning process. This year was the learning year for Jaxson Dart. So the fact that Ole Miss was able to do what it did with a quarterback who wasn't quite there yet
mm.
speaks wonders to what they could be next year. And that was always going to be the case. Jaxson was never going to be this, turn around and become this Matt Corral hero where you're carrying him out on the shoulders and build the statue and all that stuff in year one. He could be next year. He could be 2 years from now. But it was never supposed to be the case this year. It was always going to be run heavy. It was always going to be relying on your playmakers to go make plays around a young kid who is raw and still learning. And that's exactly what we saw, because there were a lot of throws that Jaxson shouldn't have made. But then at the same time, he was making some of these throws. It's like, whoa, that one right there, that's why you bring him in from USC. That's why you get on a flight to Los Angeles and, throw on your Dior Jordan dunks and get out there and talk to him and his family in Los Angeles. That's why you do that. But then there are also moments of, oh, this is still only, week 13 for him, week 14 for him. So he's young, he's learning, and now he'll have an entire offseason to get in the weight room, to get with Kiffin and just do the, quarterback whisperer thing. And I think he'll be a lot more decisive and technical next season. Whereas this year he was really loose and I don't know the antonym for technical.
I don't know either. What is do you expect any staff changes? Ole Miss had some coaching staff changes after last year. His brother almost came in as co-DC. He obviously does not. So I don't really know what happened there as to why he didn't. I don't know if you know what
Yeah, he
ultimately.
just didn't want to recruit, so he just said,
Oh,
I'll stay at the NFL and
yeah.
deal with adults.
There you go. And I understand it. Do you forecast any changes below Lane Kiffin?
I think there'll be some.
Mm,
I don't really know who, what, or where. And
mm.
I don't think anyone really does at this point. There isn't really any, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's not any smoke yet. Um, but there will need to be some sort of changes. At the very least, I think you look at the defensive coordinators, and if you want to keep those guys, you should, because Chris Partridge is a great recruiter, and Maurice Crum has proved that he can call a defense.
Mm.
Why wasn't Maurice Crum calling the defense then? So this
Mm.
year, maybe you flip the play sheet over to the guy that you brought in and you said, okay, hey, Chris, I gave you a chance. You didn't quite get the job done. This 3-man
Right.
rush thing might not be the best idea in the SEC West. Why don't we try something a little different? You continue to be the guy that gets these players ready to go on Saturdays. You continue to be a great defensive mind. Go recruit, but we're going to give Crum full control of the defense instead of
Mm.
right now it's maybe 51-49 Partridge. Maybe you flip that and you say, hey, Crum, this is yours. And then there'll be some shakeover with various position coaches and stuff. But for the most
It's
part,
very weird that it feels like there are way more co-DCs and co-OCs than ever before.
right.
That's gotta be a
100%.
weird dynamic.
I think so too. And especially when you're not making a definitive decision as to like one guy being the guy.
Right. If you're a player, you're like, "Who do I need to lean more on getting their approval for? Like, who do I really need to make sure I'm in good graces with between the 2? Like, who has more
Exactly.
sway with Lane?" Like, that kind of thing. I don't know. That's gotta be weird.
It's got to be. And it's got to be, it's just got to be a situation where who do I listen to? Who has final say? Who
Mm.
has, if there's a situation where we need to do X, Y, and Z defensively, who is the one phoning in that call? Who is the one? So I don't know. I think the most of the staff should stay more or less the same. Obviously, I don't think anyone's going to come poach Charlie Weiss Jr. or
Mhm.
Chris Partridge or Maurice Crum, so that you're not worried about them leaving. You're worried about, does Lane want to try something different? And I don't know if he does. I think there's going to be a overhaul in terms of scheme and power, but maybe not in terms of the staff itself.
I always think it's interesting when teams get nervous about that, or fan bases of teams where it's like, "Oh, I hope they don't poach so and so." It's like, if you're worried about assistants getting poached, then that means you don't have faith in the head coach. Like, that is what that stems from, where you're like, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, doesn't really matter. They're not really nervous about that sort of thing. Obviously, does it matter if you can have that sustainability in the coordinator front? Like Clemson, obviously, with Scott, Elliott, and Venables for so many years. Yeah, that was great. And you see what it looks like this year when you have to break in new coordinators and how rocky that can be. But I mean, Golish, he probably will win best assistant this year. I'm gonna guess he wins that award. I forgot what it's actually
Why
called,
the
but
front runner?
yeah, I think you should. And part of me is like, oh no, the play caller, like, what does that look like next year? It's like, well, you have the number one scoring offense in college football this year. You were top 10 last year. I think Josh Heupel will figure it out. I think Joey Halzig getting promoted, or we have a bunch of offensive analysts. Like, I'm not really worried. I'm not really worried about the offense or people getting poached. I'm not worried about Tim Banks getting poached. My main one is like Rodney Gardner. Like, that's the only one. It's like whatever we got to do to keep Rodney Gardner in Tennessee. Just Devin Hobbs coming in the building and just what the defensive line looks like. in this class and where it should go. Like that's one I want to keep winning because that's the final barrier between Tennessee really competing with Georgia year in year out is the trenches. Like that's
For
ultimately
sure.
where it's got to finish here. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll end on this. The biggest offseason question you have for Ole Miss football is what?
God, there's a lot of guys that need to be replaced on the defense.
Hmm.
The question now is there are some freshmen coming in that you should be excited about, but Lane is the transfer portal king, right?
Mm.
Self-proclaimed. He ended up giving the title to Lincoln Riley when Lincoln got Caleb.
Did he give him the title?
He gave it to him. It was a passing of the crown, more as a joke than anything. But
Can we also say real quick, and I've been saying this, and I don't understand why it's just gone under the radar, but USC should be the biggest villain in college football.
yeah,
Like what happened here, the way they got Jordan Addison, like just taking and screwing over Oklahoma in the way that they did. I mean, Lincoln admitting that it did not go great on his exit, and it was not probably the way it should have been handled and they're just gonna make the playoff maybe, and they are gonna have the Heisman quarterback. And like, you don't want this to be a successful event where it's just like you can just mortgage half your roster and then go and win a potential title and really have no culture whatsoever and it just not really matter because of the amount of talent and everything else. It's like I have nothing against Lincoln personally. I think they should be a much bigger villain than they are. It's kind of odd to me.
no, 100%. And you're exactly right. I mean, he didn't do.
Kiffin does it out of necessity. Like he's like, if you want to win the SEC West at Ole Miss, I have to dominate the portal. Like that is just it's hard to get kids to Oxford. Like it's just hard. There's not as much talent in the state of Mississippi as there is in the state of Georgia, Florida, Texas, wherever. Like it's just harder.
Yep,
Yeah, I don't know. It's very different than USC.
it is, and USC should be a bigger villain than it
Mm,
is. They're gonna get stomped by whoever they meet in the playoff if they
mm.
get that far. If they meet Georgia, it probably gets
For
pretty.
my sanity, I hope USC and TCU went out because that means Tennessee, with a victory over South Carolina, they wouldn't have gotten in either way. So we're very close to that being the ending here, and that's what I need for my own sanity.
And it's fun and different,
Hmm.
TCU, USC, even Michigan. Like
Yeah,
I don't like Michigan. I don't like Harbaugh, but I like them being in the playoff because it's fun and different. It's
right.
nice to see new names in there. It's nice to see new faces. Tennessee was up there for a minute. That was,
Mm,
as much as everyone in Oxford likes to play into the Lane Kiffin Tennessee Ole Miss rivalry, it was nice to see a fresh face. It was
hmm.
nice to see, okay, it's not just, Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, 1, 2, 3, like it has been for the last, 8 years or whatever.
Right.
So we'll see. But my biggest question with Ole Miss is how do you replace the defense? And what does the defense look like next year? Are you going to
Yeah.
continue to rush three, or are you going to maybe put another guy up there and say, okay, we're going to get down in the trenches, like you said? It's the difference between beating a team like Alabama and a team even like Arkansas this year. The
Hmm.
trenches is where you win ball games, and rushing three guys, not great.
Yeah.
Uh,
But hey, when you have a bad defense or a subpar defense and you have to replace a bunch, it's like that's not the worst thing in the world.
yeah,
It's not like you're having to replace a bunch of offensive production. I think Tennessee and Ole Miss are in the same boat here, where there's going to be so much turnover in the secondary for Tennessee. I am Byron Young will be gone on the defensive line. We'll see if Amari Thomas, but yeah, a lot of turnover on defense. But I'm like, that doesn't really scare me. I
no,
really doesn't scare me whatsoever.
yeah, and especially in the portal era.
Yeah.
Heupel and Kiffin are going to go, hey, we need a linebacker. Okay.
Mm,
Hey, we're Tennessee. Hey, we're Ole Miss. I'm Lane Kiffin. Why are you staying at we got Ole Miss got a guy from Central Michigan last year. Like,
mm.
why are you staying there when you can come play in the SEC? It's an easy sell. Defense is easier to replace than offensive production. And so
Yeah. I mean, I think
could be
Kiffin
worse.
and Heupel have it figured out where like I worry about a lot of programs where it's like if you're a defensive identity first team, tackling's worse. If you look at the NFL numbers, tackling is just getting significantly worse year over year. And with space and just the amount of practice time and the amount of turnover, I think it's just so much more sustainable to have a top 10 offense than it is to have a top 10 defense. And if you're like the Pats Fitzgeralds of the world and just the Iowas of the world, I just think it's going to be a really rough next couple of years for your program because I think you should start with the offense. Like if you do not have the right offensive playmakers, the right offensive scheme, then you're already behind the 8 ball. And I just think that's a backwards way of doing it. That's why I'm pretty optimistic about both Tennessee and Ole Miss. I think they're going to be fun. And I wish they played more often because, like,
Me
obviously the
too.
mustard bottles and everything else was funny, but like, I think there's no animosity. I think there might be a national misconception about how Tennessee fans feel about Lane. I think most like Lane. And if Lane ever came back, I think they would welcome him with open arms because I think Lane's had fun with it. Obviously, he has a kid named Knox. Obviously, he understands how crazy and big the fan base is. I don't think there's any real ill will towards most Tennessee fans and Lane Kiffin. I feel like it's playful now. I think both are cool with each other.
Yeah, it's fun. It's
Mhm.
it's fun to play these things up and
Right.
make it, the golf ball and the Morgan
Just don't
ball.
play it at 7 p.m. We can't do it at 7 p.m. You can't give college students 12 hours to drink and get ready for Lane Kiffin's return to Neyland. You cannot do that. That was always going to be a disaster. When you give them that much
It happens.
opportunity to pregame and get ready. And most people are double fisting at Tennessee games because the lines are so long for beer and alcohol that you're like, all right, I might as well just buy two for the rest of the game because I'm not going and dealing with this line right away. So it can get rowdy in a hurry
Yeah,
inside Neyland Stadium. Grayson, this has been great. I greatly appreciate you making the time this evening, and
always.
yeah, well, we'll have to do it again soon. And you have yourself a great rest of your. It's not really holiday week, but get start to
Holiday
the holiday
season.
season, Christmas season, right?
Absolutely.
There you go. Thanks, Grayson.